So is everybody feeling all that relief at the pump? You know, those low gas prices that we're supposed to be experiencing because of the release of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. How's that relief at the pump treating you, people? Yeah, you're still paying about $1 more a gallon than you were paying last year. And so that's how the government says, well, you're paying less for gas because you're paying more than you were last year. Yeah, people, you've got to love it. Now, I've done my research on this Strategic Petroleum Reserve and this recent release of oil by order of the International Energy Agency. It's a mind-blowing story, but a lot of people aren't going to understand it because it's not sexy. And I'm not going to make it sexy right here. I'm just going to tell you what I know. So I'm going to look around in the mainstream media and see how this is getting covered. So Wayne.com, you know, that's Wayne TV, the CBS affiliate in Fort Wayne. Well, they're going to cover this thing. I'm going to see it on their website, but it's an Associated Press story. Drivers catch a break as gas prices fall. Another 25-cent drop is expected by mid-July. So this is going to be an AP story, Associated Press. When prices approached $4 in early May, drivers were worried that $5 a gallon gasoline was a possibility this summer. But since then, oil prices have collapsed. The result of slowing economic growth in developed countries, weaker demand for oil and gas, and this week's decision by the U.S. and other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from strategic reserves. So it looks really great that the United States and other countries are releasing 60 million barrels of oil into the market. So you can get that relief at the pump. You know, you can get relief at the pump by the release of this oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You know, the oil that you paid for that went into that reserve, that oil savings. Well, you got to pay for that, and now that it's being released into the market, well, you get some relief at the pump by paying more per gallon than what you were paying in 2010. That's the United States government there. Black is white, up is down, right is wrong. That's the way they do it. Okay, so let's finish here with this AP story. They're going to say, economists say that while, for instance, a 25-cent per gallon drop only saves the typical driver $12.50 per month, it has a huge effect both on the economy as a whole and on the psychology of consumers. So yeah, so economists are going to tell you with this this relief you're getting at the pump, well, a 25-cent per gallon drop only saves the typical driver $12.50 per month. That's the money you get to keep in your wallet, $12.50 per month. Well, since it's only saving you $12.50 per month, you must understand it's here to have an effect on the psychology of consumers. It's supposed to work on your brain. So it has a huge effect both on the economy as a whole and on the psychology of consumers. So it's all this psychological stuff. They're just playing with you psychologically by telling you you're paying less for gasoline when you're actually paying more than you were last year. So let's move on. Now, what is the IEA, this International Energy Agency? The International Energy Agency, the IEA, is based in Paris, France. And there are 28 member nations of this International Energy Agency based in France. And those 28 nations, well, they are the world's largest oil consumers. They are the largest oil eaters. They're just eaters. They've got to have that stuff. They can't produce enough for themselves. So the International Energy Agency, that's 28 of the world's largest oil consuming nations. They need oil. They can't create enough for themselves, so they create this agency to make themselves look very powerful. All they're doing is compiling their weakness because they're the 28 of the world's largest, but they're the largest consumers. So now we're going to get to see where this is very interesting because I'm going to talk about government manipulation of the oil markets, which is government manipulation of the markets, which is Soviet-style economics right here in the United States of America. You live under a fascist regime. Mussolini called fascism corporatism. the combination, the marriage of corporate and government power. You live under tyranny, you live under fascism, okay? So we're going to talk about the tapping of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is described by members of your Congress as a weapon, as an economic weapon that is to be used against people on the stock market and to be used against OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve is a weapon against those entities, a weapon. And so ABC News is going to say, House Democrats applaud Obama for tapping Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Boehner says move threatens national security. ABC News reporting this. House Democrats applauding your president, applauding President Barack Obama for following the orders of an international energy agency based in Paris, France. Applauding it. Okay? So, the White House announced that it will release 30 million barrels of oil from the nation's strategic petroleum reserves. Representative Edward Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, said, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the one weapon we have against OPEC, and it has a proven record of historically driving down prices. So, Representative Edward Markey, the Democrat of Massachusetts, he's going to say the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, United States oil stockpile, just a savings of oil, just an oil savings account, saving barrels of oil. 727 million barrels of that stuff, releasing 30 million barrels of that stuff. So Representative Edward Markey, the Democrat from Massachusetts, says the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the one weapon we have against OPEC, and it has a proven record of historically driving down prices. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is a weapon that we use against OPEC. Why does the United States need a weapon against OPEC? And if the United States of America needs a weapon against OPEC, why does the United States only have one weapon against OPEC? But this weapon, it has a proven record of historically driving down prices. This weapon against OPEC has a proven record of historically manipulating the market. House Democrats applauding the manipulation of markets by government under order of the International Energy Agency based in Paris, France. So Representative Peter Welch, the Democrat of Vermont, well, he's going to say that what the president's decision does is send a shot across the bow to these speculators. So again, Representative Edward Markey is going to call the Strategic Petroleum Reserve a weapon. And then you're going to have Representative Peter Welch, the Democrat from Vermont, saying the president's decision sends a shot across the bow to speculators. This weapon is used to send a shot across the bow to speculators. Yeah, because everybody thinks the speculators are the ones raising the price of petroleum, raising the price of oil. It is not the speculators. The speculators are just a bunch of mugs trying to make money on these stocks and commodities and these securities and futures and all that stuff. Just mugs trying to make money on that. Well, when you've got Ben Bernanke of the Federal Reserve just creating buying power willy-nilly, the United States Treasury creating money, just printing it up because they're borrowing this stuff from the Federal Reserve willy-nilly, when you have all this new buying power, when you have all this new money being created, that is inflation. That is inflation. A result of inflation, a symptom of inflation, is prices at the pump going up, prices of food going up. That is a symptom of inflation. Inflation is the inflation of your monetary supply. Your dollar bills, more of them being created. So the ones that are around, there's more of them. So each one is worth less. Your buying power being decreased because the stack of cash is increasing. Inflating. Inflation. Ben Bernanke, the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury, responsible for all this inflation. That's why oil prices are going up. But the United States and Ben Bernanke, Federal Reserve, they want to control the economy. They want to control it by all this market manipulation. by bailing out their buddies at the banks and by releasing oil when our market really doesn't need it. It's an economic weapon to manipulate the market. Okay. Now, this weapon that's being used, this market manipulation, it's going to provide short-term relief. Short-term. And these politicians know it. They're openly telling you on ABC News. Because Representative Peter Welch, who's going to tell you, this is a weapon that's used to send a shot across the bow. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve release. Okay. This is a very welcome announcement. We all know it's short-term, but you know what? We need short-term action to provide some immediate relief for our families and businesses that are getting so hammered by these artificially inflated gas and home heating fuel prices. We all know it's short-term. Representative Peter Welch, the Democrat of Vermont, letting you know that the relief that you're getting at the pump, we all know, in Washington, we all know it's a short-term move. But you know what? We need short-term action to provide some immediate relief for our families and businesses that are getting so hammered by these artificially inflated gas and home heating prices. So he's going to openly tell you, Peter Welch, that your gas prices are artificially inflated. So they're going to use what Representative Edward Markey calls the one weapon that has a proven record of historically driving down prices. We're going to use the one weapon we have against OPEC. And it has a proven record of historically driving down prices. Releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has a proven record of historically manipulating the oil market. It has the effect, a proven record of artificially deflating the price at the pump, because Representative Peter Welch says the gas prices have been artificially inflated. So that's why we need an international body to tell your president, to order your president to artificially deflate the price of oil. Are you getting this, people? Soviet-style economics. And they all know it's short-term. Even Representative Rush Holt, the Democrat from New Jersey, he agreed, telling reporters that the move provides American consumers relief in the short term. Short-term market manipulation. That's what you have going on. That's what you have going on. Now, a lot of you people, this is not going to make sense to you. It's going to be a head-scratcher. It's going to be a head-scratcher. So Bloomberg has a story for you. Headline, head-scratcher. IEA petroleum release to inflate U.S. crude supply glut. You should be scratching your head right now. You should be asking questions. Bloomberg is scratching its head. You know Michael Bloomberg, three-term mayor of New York. Well, his news organization is scratching its head. Head scratcher. International Energy Agency petroleum release to inflate United States crude supply glut. A glut is an excessively abundant supply of something. So that means the United States crude supply is excessively abundant. There's too much oil in the United States crude supply. There's too much here now. So Bloomberg can't figure out why the International Energy Agency is releasing oil into an already glutted, an already excessively abundant supply of oil in the United States. Bloomberg can't figure this out. Can't figure out why the International Energy Agency wants to manipulate the oil market with a weapon. With a weapon. Okay? So Bloomberg's going to say this supply addition of 60 million barrels comes at a time when refiners in the world's biggest economy have more crude on hand and are importing less as demand for fuel such as gasoline and diesel is slipping, according to Energy Department figures. Okay? So the addition of this 30 million barrels from the U.S., and if that's going to be released in the U.S., well, this supply addition comes at a time when refiners in America's economy have more crude on hand. They have a glut. So the National Petrochemical and Refiners Association criticized the decision to tap the strategic reserve as a political move that makes no sense and will do nothing to benefit consumers. It's going to do nothing to benefit consumers. Just going to push down these oil futures, going to hurt some of these oil stocks, going to give you some relief at the pump, even though you're paying more than you're paying last year. But even that relief is going to be short term. Everybody talking about it, okay? So it's going to be the American Petroleum Institute, according to Bloomberg, saying this release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and this IEA release of oil, this is a reactionary move based on failed energy policy by this administration, the American Petroleum Institute said. The American Petroleum Institute represents about 400 producers. So Charles Drevna, the president of the National Petrochemical and Refiners Association, says the action, releasing all this oil reserve into the market to manipulate the market. Charles Drevna of the National Petrochemical and Refiners Association says this action will do nothing to benefit consumers. Instead, it leaves our nation vulnerable if hurricanes and other natural disasters or a foreign crisis causes a real supply shortage. So Charles Drevna says there's no real supply shortage right now. And this release of this oil into the market to manipulate the market, when there is no supply shortage, well, this is going to leave our nation vulnerable if hurricanes or other natural disasters or foreign crisis causes a real supply shortage. Open market manipulation by the United States government and the IEA, Soviet-style New World Order market manipulation going on now, people. Okay? So Bloomberg can't figure out why the IEA is releasing petroleum in the United States when there's a glut of petroleum in the United States. Well, Bloomberg, I don't think that oil is going to be sold here in the United States. The United States has a glut of oil. They have too much oil. So that oil being released by order of the International Energy Agency, well, that's probably going to be sold all over the world, everywhere else but the U.S. We have a glut here. Stop scratching your head, Michael Bloomberg. Because, over in Hong Kong, ChinaDaily.com, well, they're not scratching their head. No, you're going to have Puro Saxena, the CEO of Puro Saxena Wealth Management. Well, he's going to write this column for ChinaDaily.com. IEA intervention has no impact on fundamentals. No impact on fundamentals. No impact on the real stuff. Just artificial market manipulation for short-term results. Short-term. So, Puro Saxena is going to say this: by knocking down the price of key commodities, the United States establishment is desperately trying to reduce inflationary pressure, which will make it easier for the Federal Reserve to unleash stimulus, to just create more buying power out of nothing that the United States Treasury can turn into Federal Reserve notes that are debt instruments. Although this intervention in the commodities market may cause prices to come under pressure near term, short term, it will have no impact on the long-term supply and demand fundamentals. You've got to understand, this warring in Libya, the fact that you've got President Barack Obama saying all this death and destruction and mayhem, it's not hostilities. So why should I have to ask Congress for permission to kill all these people, charging the American public for it? Why should we call that war? No hostilities here, just death and destruction, people dying. NATO saying we're hitting all these military targets in Libya. Former Defense Secretary Robert Gates going to tell you people, well, yes, we're blowing up all these military targets, but if you see any civilian body parts there, well, that's Gaddafi's forces. That's these people loyal to Gaddafi just spreading around body parts. Robert Gates expecting you to believe that. Because in the United States consumes almost 19 million barrels of oil every day. It's like 18,771,000 barrels of oil every day. This 30 million barrel release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, well, that would take care of the United States for about a day and a half. A day and a half. Now, Libya, where we're blaming all these high oil prices on the war in Libya that the United States is embarking on, the United States Marines preparing for a full-scale invasion of Libya. Any of you that know a Marine know that this is the truth. They've been telling you this for months. The Marines preparing for a full-scale invasion of Libya. All this is over a country that, at its peak, before it was being disrupted by this war brought on by the United States and NATO, well, Libya was pumping out 1.6 million barrels of oil a day. These mugs are a net exporter of oil. They use 270,000 barrels of oil a day. 270,000 barrels versus our 19 million barrels of oil a day. That's why the United States is warring on Libya, because they want Libya to be friendly to ConocoPhillips, to ExxonMobil, to BP, all your oil giant buddies, because it's just business to them. It's just business. Now it's going to be Patrick O'Connor of Global Research figuring this out, letting you know. With his story, oil companies prepare for post-Gaddafi Libya. It's just business, people. According to Patrick O'Connor, he's going to quote Paolo Scaroni, the CEO of Italian oil giant Eni. So he declared that we think everything will return to normal in Libya. Any government that comes to power in Libya will have to restart production working with the companies that already know the country. When we look a year from now, we look with optimism. So that's Paolo Scaroni, the CEO of Italian oil giant Eni. He's not worried about all this war and destruction and mayhem and death in Libya. He's looking a year from now with optimism. He loves it. He loves it. He doesn't care. So Patrick O'Connor, Global Research, also going to report from Reuters. Arab Spring likely to leave oil firms unscathed. Okay? So this article is going to note that the energy giants are striving to ensure that these uprisings of workers and young people across North Africa and the Middle East do not disrupt the lucrative arrangements previously worked out with various deposed despots. So these oil giants, these energy giants, they don't see this Arab Spring stuff, these uprisings of workers and young people. Well, they don't see that disrupting their lucrative arrangements with various deposed despots. Well, a despot is a dictator going to rule with cruelty, with violence. These oil companies love working with them. They don't care. It's just business. It's just business, because they want business to go back to normal. Optimism. That's the way these oil giants see it. And this whole notion of Libya just going back to normal after all this bombing and death and mayhem because of the United States military, well, all that normalcy, well, that's going to be wrought by all this death and destruction. So the United States empire can install a puppet that's going to be friendly to the United States. That's why all this death and destruction is going on in Libya. It's so heartless and it's so cruel. I talk about it so you people can stand up against it, because I don't think most of you are that heartless. You're just misinformed, and some of you are scared. I understand it. But you've got to be able to find that strength inside you, and find that strength from above, from that higher power that's going to give you moral guidance so you can make moral judgment. Don't be afraid of making it. Your government is not going to choose wisely for you. Quit looking for your government for your guidance, because you're going to see that they're going to use things like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as a weapon. They're going to use petroleum as a weapon against OPEC. OPEC is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So the United States is going to use petroleum as a weapon against the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. They have all the petroleum. Why are we using one weapon, and that one weapon is petroleum? Why would we use our petroleum weapon against the lords of petroleum? It makes no sense. That's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. So people, please start paying attention. The SPR is going to give you short-term results. So, I'll see you next short term.